Welcome to Cow Talks. I'm Chris Prevatt, Beef Cattle and Forage Commodity Director for the Alabama Farmers Federation.
And I am Marcelo Wallau, Forage Extension Specialist with the University of Florida.
And this is our podcast, where we dive deep into the main topics affecting livestock and forage production in the southeastern United States.
From the mainstream media to new technologies straight from our research stations.
From cattle prices to international trade.
From our pastures and beyond.
Join us on this journey as we tackle the main issues affecting our producers and the sustainability of our production systems.
So welcome to Cow Talks. Chris and I have two special guests today, Dr. José Dubeux, Professor of Forage Agronomy in the North Florida Research and Education Center in Mariana, and Dr. Kleber de Souza, our new forage breeder, also in the North Florida Research and Education Center in Mariana. Thanks for coming, guys, and welcome.
Thank you, Marcelo. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you, Chris.
So, Dubeux, Chris and I started the Cow Talks podcast a couple of years ago, and the goal here is to bring some of our farmers some more experience and knowledge and discussion about different approaches to livestock grazing systems. And by the way, Chris, I recorded one with Sam Wisely about deer. Is deer livestock or is deer wildlife for you?
Oh, all livestock.
Livestock, yeah. So deer production in Florida is actually quite big. We have 350 deer farms in the state of Florida. And super cool podcast I recorded last week with Sam. Hopefully coming into Cow Talks in a couple of days. But anyhow, so the goal here is and let's just really start getting going here. The goal here is to talk about grazing 365. Can we do 365 days or maybe 360 days or maybe 300 days? How many days can we graze in southern Alabama, southern Georgia, North Florida?
Okay. Hey, Marcelo and Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. And first of all, I want to congratulate you for this podcast. It's an amazing tool for us to traveling on the road and learning and, get to know more people. Marcelo, when I got here 10 years ago, I was challenged. Okay, can you develop a grazing system that we can do all year round grazing? And it's quite challenging because, this region is different than South Florida. We do have a more defined cool season, cooler temperatures, and you need to play around with the different forests. But so with that vision in mind, we start working with the colleagues and extension and producers and research from the tri-state area. And the short answer is yes, we can graze 365 days. We've been doing that for the last couple of years. It's not going to be on the same ground. It's not going to be with only one grass. You're going to have to play with different species. And by the way, this region is an amazing region to grow forages. We have a mild winter compared to northern regions of the country. And actually, the cool season is a blessing here because you can put 2 pounds per day on stockers, for example, just on grass and minerals and water. That's it. But anyhow, the traditional system here is a perennial grass, typically bahia grass, at least here in Florida. I know some Bermuda grass and perhaps in northern Alabama, Chris can talk more about that. But here in Florida is mostly bahia grass, and the traditional is cow-calf system on bahia grass, and maybe feeding hay during the off-season, during the fall. But feeding hay is one of the most expensive operations that you have in the farm because of all the inputs that you have, not only the labor, but also the fuel, machinery, plus the losses when you're feeding the hay is 20-30% loss at least. When you do the math, it's really expensive. So it would be perhaps better to put the cow to do the job and get the benefit of nutrient cycling, also building the soil health. So we've been playing that for the last 10 years, and one of the goals as well, not only graze 365 days, but also do that in an economical way, and I hope Chris can help me on that. So one of the things that we want to reduce is the fertilizer input. So we've been trying to include more legumes into the system. So we've been able to develop a system here where in the summer we have bahia grass integrated with perennial peanut, Arax glabrata, which is a perennial warm season legume. And we overseed those pastures with cool season forages, by late October typically. And we've been putting, for example, oats and ryegrass and a blend of clovers, crimson, red, and ball clover. But when you do that, you still have a gap from October until, late October until mid-January, where the cool season forages are coming up. And then that's when, we've been playing with another species, Ematria altissima, which is limpo grass. Not sure if you heard about limpo grass, but it's not new. In Florida, at least in South Florida, there are more than 200,000 acres of limpo grass. It's well adapted to wet soil, but also grows well in high grounds, as long as you have, enough rainfall. And it's good for stockpiling. So what we've been doing is stockpiling some limpo grass by late August, letting it grow until late October, putting the animals from late October until mid-January, and that fills the gap. But again, it's not on the same ground. It's not with one grass, several species, and you probably need to supplement when you put cattle on limpo grass, depending on the type of cattle that you're doing.
So your system here, we have bahia grass, that's our summer base, and potentially we have that with some perennial peanut there. Why is the perennial peanut in that mixture? So you mentioned reduction of nitrogen, but if you think about how much nitrogen, how much cost to establish that peanut, you can put a lot of nitrogen in your pasture for several years, and you're still lower than the cost of establishing peanut.
Well, the beauty of the perennial peanut is that once, the tricky part is to establish, but once you establish it, it's there. We have perennial peanut in Gainesville, at the beef research unit that was established in the early 80s, in Dr. Solenberg's program. So it's been there for 40, 50 years almost. And it just gets better if you treat it well and if it's tolerant to grazing. So you kind of dilute that initial investment, it's a long, it persists in the pasture. But another reason, Marcelo, is to improve the gain. Because if you compare, animals grazing just on bahia grass or grazing bahia grass plus perennial peanut, you improve almost 70 to 80% the average daily gain. You go from 0.7 pounds per day to 1.3 pounds per day, and that really makes a difference. So at the end, in the summer, you're able to produce a way more gain, and at the end, you pay, with the gain plus the nitrogen fertilizer, you pay all of that investment that you have up front. So it's really a great deal. And there are, by the way, options, for example, in the EQUIP program, there are options to help to offset the establishment cost. So that's something that producers could potentially apply and reduce the initial establishment.
Yeah, so Nico, and you're going to appreciate this, Chris, and Nico, one of my students, Hannah Baker, a newer economist in ONA, and I put together this very simple spreadsheet, the cost of production, because that was my question. Okay, with the cost for peanut is really high, does it really pay off? So if you consider establishing strips, so half of it, and you consider that it's going to take 3 years to use it, basically in the first year you can almost pay it. Of course, using cattle prices today that are very good, but even if cattle prices are not that good, in the first 3-4 years, you already pay off the investment. So it actually balances out pretty quickly to put that peanut. One thing you didn't mention, Dubeux, is something that I know Chris loves, which are the summer annuals. Chris, what's your summer annual? What's the role of your summer annuals in this system here for North Florida, Southern Alabama?
Yeah, so with summer annuals, it's not for beef cows. It's for thinking about the specific class of livestock that you need higher gains on, whether that's preconditioning cattle in Florida, Southern Alabama in those summer months. If you buy some high risk stocker calves, something along those lines, where you need higher average daily gains, that's kind of one of the places that I would look at.
Chris, you were saying something that was very interesting. Our summer annuals were not targeting our low maintenance cow population. We're targeting those that are high demand, high nutrient demand with those annuals, right?
Absolutely.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah, just in terms of, dealing with things that require higher nutrient gains, in terms of high risk stocker calves or even preconditioning cattle. Say we have some fall born calves and we start preconditioning them in June or July. Summer annuals are a really good fit for those animals that have high nutrient demands, as well as, if we have a grass finishing operation where we are trying to actually put weight gain on animals in the Southeast and grass finish them, just about the only way is going to be with a high quality summer annual forage mix. And there's some great varieties out there or species out there in terms of sorghum Sudan grass, pearl millet, you have cowpeas, sun hemp, things that are, very high in quality. I've always been a fan of BMR grazing corns because the TDN gets so high in those plants. So any of those sorghums that they definitely can put significant weight on cattle during those summer months, where just our traditional Bahia grass, Bermuda grass, you're definitely going to need a significant amount of supplementation to go with them to get adequate gains through those summer months. Whereas on some of those high quality summer annuals, you can still get 1.75, 2 pounds average daily gain. If we keep it at a vegetative state.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of the main forages we're using here, and also in Florida we've been pushing a lot of the sorghum Sudan mixes. I know Nico De Lorenzo has a very interesting proposal also with not grazing but with silage. So I think we see some of those annual forages being used to some extent here. I like our mix, Chris, of the either sorghum or pearl millet. Pearl millet will put in higher areas where it's a little drier. Sorghum can tolerate a little bit more of the wet ground. And the cowpea, that climbing cowpea, because of the canopy architecture, I think makes a pretty good companion crop. And then we have of course, the sun hemp. I know you you've been playing with crabgrass. You played with crabgrass before there, Chris?
Oh, absolutely. Crabgrass, any place that, the biggest thing is to think about with the summer annuals is establishment, because you're going to have competition in terms of you've got moisture, you've got a growing season where, things are really trying to take off once you get in that April, May, June time period. You got to get stuff established. You need to prepare a seed bed. You can't deal with the competition from these other plants. So the crabgrass is great. The improved varieties are so much higher average daily gain than the native crabgrass. So looking at Mojo or Red River or Quick and Big, those types of varieties of crabgrass, you do see significantly higher average daily gains, and it's a fantastic reseeder. So once you plant it, you're always going to have some. You might need to add a little bit for sometimes, but it is a good plant to have if you're in a grazing system.
Nice. So Dubeux, how does the summer annuals fit in your system, or they don't fit in your system?
Well, I think there is a place, Marcelo, for everything. And like Chris mentioned, if you're targeting background in some calves or targeting higher gains, I think that's a great option. And one thing though, it's sometimes you have the weather that might vary, and so if you have some irrigation, that would reduce a lot the risks. And actually, we were talking about that yesterday in terms of potential rotation crops for the region here. And I know traditional, at least here in Florida, is 1 year of peanut followed by 2 years of cotton. I know in Georgia they typically do peanut and cotton, maybe corn. But anyhow, sometimes when you compare, some stocker systems on annual forages, like Chris mentioned, might be a better option, even than planting cotton. Besides, building soil health, much better, I think, in my opinion. So I think that there are, potential ways to use summer annuals if you're able to reduce the weather risks. And I think at the end you can potentially use as a rotation crop as well. There's so many, agricultural land that we could potentially use for that I think that could be a good option.
Yeah, Jose hit on a great point there in terms of putting it in a crop field rather than in a dedicated pasture. You don't have that additional competition, and it also extends the rotation. It breaks the cycle in terms of some of the pests and some of the issues that row crop farmers deal with. So that is just a great place. Is whenever they pencil it out and we're going to lose a significant amount of money on cotton, and we have the potential to potentially add some profitability there on some stocker calves, grazing summer annuals on some row crop land, I think makes a lot of sense some years. So they definitely probably won't want to include the crabgrass, but some of the pearl millet, sorghums, as well as think about those legumes that you mentioned, Marcelo. I like it.
One thing that Dubeux and I were talking about yesterday is legumes are great in those grazing systems, but we also have some issues with them when we're looking into the integrated crop livestock system that we're talking about. We harvest the cotton, harvest that peanut, and it's going to be planted into cool season forages. We need to get that going quickly. We need to get it used fast. And basically, by the time the clovers start coming up, we're pretty much getting ready to terminate that crop to plant to that pasture to plant the cover crop. So, Dubeux, what's the role of the legume on that system, or probably not a good role, and maybe just the high nitrogen?
Right. Yes, that's a great question, Marcelo. And we've been trying to reduce nitrate leaching, which is a major problem here in Florida, and we've been trying to play, reducing nitrogen input from fertilizer by including some of those legumes. And you hit the point there. Those systems needs to be intensive. Once you remove the row crop, you need to next day, if possible, plant the cool season forage and start grazing as fast as possible. So we will need some earlier type of legumes, and I know Dr. Esteban Rios has been developing some early clovers. I didn't have a chance to put that in a grazing, although I did assess that in small plots. And it's way like a crimson clover that is much earlier than the typical crimson clover. That could potentially be a good fit. But if not, maybe just go ahead and fertilize the grass. Even though our data show that when even fertilize the grass under grazing, we have way less nitrate leaching compared just with the fallow, which is the business as usual that a lot of people do. So in summary, yes, I think those systems are more intensive. they're quick. You need to avoid risks, and fertilization is probably a more secure way to go, unless we have more earlier type of legumes that could come from the breeding programs.
Talking about breeding programs, Chris, we have a new forage breeder here, which is my good friend and colleague, Dr. Kleber de Souza.
Hello, guys. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm Kleber de Souza. I'm just starting here in Mariana as the new forage breeder. We have been talking a lot about breeding, and we have some exciting species to be working with, like Dr. Dubeux was talking about crimson clover, but we could work with ball clover, vetch, some hemp, using as legume for summer. And we have the perennial peanuts that certainly is some species that we should be putting a lot of efforts. And maybe in future years, be thinking about to have any perennial peanut that could be propagated by seeds. That would be very amazing.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to put you to the task to improve some of the forages to specifically to feed some of those systems. And we're talking about that yesterday so you create a new variety, create a new forage, thinking about the existing system, and sometimes it does not fit well, but you can create different options for feeding different types of systems, right?
Exactly.
And I think this is one that we can look into how to improve some of the early production of those forage legumes to feed into the integrated crop livestock systems. Great potential here.
Yes, it's very important to understand what will be the use of each variety. They are not the same. Each variety can be addressed to solve some issue into the system, and we have to be we need to have very clear target traits to be improving.
Yeah, no, and Marcelo, I was talking to Kleber because one of the components of our system, let's put that way, is a stockpile lymphograph. And we've been trying also to establish some legume to help with the protein in that stockpile biomass. But it's challenging because we stage the lymphograph in August, late August typically, which is still hot and humid, and the lymphograph is still growing very actively. And at the same time, we need some legume that could grow into the winter. So we've been playing around and tried to put some large seeded legumes like vetch or winter pea, and we try other ones. And actually the vetch was the champion, was a pretty good option, but it was kind of late in the game, it was not there in November, December. So I was talking to Kleber if, we could potentially develop an earlier type of vetch that could fit really well into that system. So
exactly. The challenge here will make this vetch germinate at a higher temperature that is still in the end of the summer, on the beginning of the fall. But we believe that we can improve that because probably there is some genetic variability for germination at higher temperature. And vetch has a big seed, so this helps to grow first and faster than other legumes that has small seeds. Early flowering is something that's not that hard to improve in forests. So certainly we can have some common vetch or hairy vetch that will be able to produce forage early in the season.
I have a good strategy to improve vetch production, nitrogen. It's interesting because we include vetches in our cool season demos at the dairies, and the dairies are applying wastewater. They have wastewater irrigation there, and some of our vetches are beautiful. So by February that we're harvesting, we have a ton of biomass there. But of course, it is in a system that has high nitrogen already, and they're putting nitrogen, so we're not counting on the vetch nitrogen or the nitrogen fixation for it to be established. So it's kind of cheating.
And
but
water.
I think we have water there too. So that leads me to we deviated a little bit here. We're talking about some of the annual forages and all that. One of the things that farmers always say, I don't want to plant this because it's too risky. Chris, risk versus reward in this situation. Would you go with a little bit of risk because the reward is high, or is a safe system is better?
That's a good thought process there, Marcelo, because the two plants that I recommend the most, I think, are the least risky to most growers, whether they have an agronomy background or not, are annual ryegrass and crabgrass, because they're relatively high quality and they're pretty easy to establish. So whenever I think about the risk versus the reward, I always kind of lean to those two, because I feel like my best, rate of return, whether things go right or not, is kind of those, and they're relatively cheap to establish as well. We talked about the summer annuals earlier. I feel like they're a little riskier in terms of, whether you have that additional competition from other plants that are trying to grow at the same time. You have to consider the seed cost of those, and there's always the trade-off with summer annuals, because it's pretty easy to just be grazing Bahia grass and, you get half the gain, but a lot of people will say it's free. It's not free, but it's a lot cheaper. So there's always cheaper options there. But I think it's important to think about the risk versus reward is also, when are we going to have the gaps, and just make sure that I'm spending, money for spending money on riskier plants to fill in those gaps. I love what Dr. Dubeux said about, the stockpiled limpo grass, because whenever I'm working with farmers and ranchers, where's their gap at? For the most part, I think it's late October to early January. If for, a progressive producer that's already planting winter annuals, he might still have that gap. So a late fall, early winter gap is kind of where I still see a lot of people struggling. They plant annual ryegrass probably late October, early November, and they're probably not going to get on grazing until January, unless they have something stockpiled. So those perennial forages run out in the late fall of the year, and it's a management consideration between how many grazing acres we have and how many animals that we're going to run. So, but I love the thought process of risk versus reward there. I've tried a lot of different plants. Marcelo, you tell me too many, but I try them on a small scale. A lot of these riskier things, try them small scale, develop you a little plot of something. And then that's kind of how I take the riskier ones, and then stick with what works in a region. How much rainfall you should average expect, and just try to focus on things that have worked over time, and then include some of those riskier options once you see how they can work in your system.
You bet, and I think one of the ways to reduce risk is be willing to make the investment. I think a lot of the times we fail. And I speak from experience, because sometimes I plant something at my place and I don't really want to invest a lot of money because I'm not getting much out of it. I'm more on the cover side, just a few cows using, and I don't want to really invest the money into getting some of those forages going. And guess what? They don't work. So if you're not willing to make the investment and do it right, might be better off not doing it. So let me take one step forward here. Okay, we've talked about the different options across the year, but now I need to get to a point where I'm putting together the system in my farm. I love this thought exercise of I'm talking to the farmers, and many times we go, especially when we're talking to small farmers, they have one or two paddocks. I cannot do this, I cannot do that because I don't have the visions. Oh, should I convert my whole area to this or to that? And I say, well, not really. We want to have diversity here. So let's put together this thought exercise here. Let's put together the system in terms of space. Okay, we have a farm. We're going to put together this farm. Our base is going to be Bahia grass. Any space for Bermuda grass in our system?
Again, I think hay as a backup plant could be important in a farm. not as the basis of the system. And Bermuda grass could be a good option for hay production. So there is always a place there. But I would not plan my system to be based on hay because, again, I think it's expensive because of all the inputs and machinery and fertilizer that you need to put, harvesting labor plus the losses. But the Bermuda is a great hay crop.
We can use the Bermuda for grazing too sometimes.
We could, yes.
Just a little. We need, and that goes back to what Kleber was mentioning before in terms of how the forage feed the system. When we think about Bermuda for hay, we cannot manage it based. We cannot manage the same way we manage our Bahia grass, of course. So if we refer to say like half of our area is going to be our base summer perennial crop, 60% of our area.
Yeah, I would say 2/3. Yeah,
2/3 of our area is going to be that safe,
yes,
cheap summer cow pasture, let's say. And then we're going to put the limpo grass in, especially for North Florida. I don't know if I'm going to take the limpo grass up to Alabama, Chris, but I've seen it there. I don't know.
Small plot.
Is small plot there?
Yeah, we're gonna play with it on small plot for a good 5 years.
Yeah, I would too. I have seen in Central Alabama.
It's in Clinton.
Yeah, it was growing, but I don't know if producing a lot. But anyhow, so we're going to put a limper grass. How much limper grass we need in our system in terms of area, percentage of area, to be able to make that system work?
A rule of thumb that some ranches are doing that, Marcelo, is for every 3 acres of Bahia grass, you have 1 acre of limpo grass. So it's around 25% of the area. And that's enough to hold, the cow for a cow-calf pair for the year. That are more like extensive systems.
Extensive systems.
Yeah.
With some protein supplementation in winter and all that.
Right. And if it's cow-calf, it's different than stockers. The requirements are a little less in terms of the quality of the protein. So you could have liquid feed and other source. But for growing animals, probably need a better source of protein.
And by the way, we're talking limpo grass here. We're talking about fall use, but limpo grass right now is actually growing and growing faster than Bahia grass. So we can use that limpo grass through the spring and summer.
That's a great point. Yes, you can do it. But you just need to be careful on the management. Limpo grass is not Bahia grass. You need to be careful to not overgraze. You should not overgraze anything. But if you overgraze limpo grass, would be a big disaster than overgrazing Bahia grass.
Yes.
So you need to be careful on that. But yes, by all means, Marcelo, it's a very productive grass in the summer, and you could potentially use for grazing or for other things like baleage. There are different uses that you can.
So the limpo grass, we're going to use it probably from where? Mid-October, early November into December, January.
Yeah, late October to late January. That's what we've been using here.
That's been using.
But again, you could potentially use in the summer, like you just said, if you want to graze that.
So now we're getting to the cool season here, and we have a ton of different forages we can plant in the cool season. We have ryegrass, we have the small grains that are mostly used here, ryegrass, oat, small grains, oat, rye, triticale. Some people plant wheat. Some of the clovers, but then it's not only the species, but how we're going to put that, because we have 2 options here. We can go into part of our Bahia grass as overseeding, or we can also, we can also go into some prepared seed bed, or that does not necessarily mean a lot of tillage. It can be tilled sod. How we're going to do this? We're going to overseed.
That's a good point, Marcelo. And yes, there is a difference there. If you have a prepared land or no-till, where you don't have the competition of the perennial grass, it'll be easier to establish the forage in the fall, and they'll come quicker compared to overseeding on top of Bahia grass. We've been overseeding on Bahia grass for the last 8 years, and it's been working for the last 8 years. But yes, some years where we don't have a combination of soil moisture and cooler temperatures, we need to delay our planting a little bit. And sometimes you lose like almost 30 days of grazing because of that. And the competition with the grass will make the established to be a little slower. And you can help with that by fertilizing at the beginning, helping the cool season forage to come up. And also, it's really important to choose the right perennial grass if you want to overseed, because some of those, like you have Riara, grows longer into the season, and some others, like Argentine Bahia grass, for example, it's more seasonal, so that makes a difference when you're overseeding. But in summary, we've been doing that for the last 80 years on dry land, no irrigation. Some years we are able to plant in late October, some years just late November, some years, first week of December. It really depends on the weather. So unless you have irrigation, if you have irrigation, that's a different story, but most of the people don't.
If we need some prepared seed bed, because I know in your system, Chris, we're also going to have our summer annuals there for those stalkers, for those replacement heifers. If I'm going to get some prepared seed bed, we're going to put that no-till in a sod that we kill it. What are we doing? How much area are we doing, and what are we planting in that winter there?
So pretty aggressive on winter grazing, and I think I don't want everyone to think that you need to plant every single acre, but my system is a stalker cattle system where we're trying to get as much annual ryegrass and oats as possible. So the majority of our entire system of 600 acres will receive winter annuals, because I can increase the stocking rate pretty fast. So whether it is a prepared seed bed right behind the summer annuals, or if we are overseeding onto perennial pasture, we're gonna try to get annual ryegrass, oats, in on just about every acre there, because of the winter annuals play so much of a role in putting weight gain on stalker cattle. That the advantage of the behind the summer annuals is it's probably 30 days of grazing. In some years, if it's a dry year, it actually may be more, because those perennial soils, the perennial sods, that they're just sucking all the moisture out on a dry year. It's just hard to get them going, versus the summer annuals where you don't have the additional competition. They're not taking up as much as that moisture. So slightly different system. If I was cow-calf, I would want, a lot. I would need the summer annuals. I probably, other than preconditioning, if I was preconditioning my own cattle, that would kind of be where I'd use the summer annuals if I had a cow-calf operation. But that's we're trying to get as many acres of annual ryegrass.
Yeah. What about those replacement heifers would fit that summer annual too?
Yeah, I think they can, especially if this is, recently weaned. They're kind of in a preconditioning backgrounding system. We want them gaining, in Nicholas Stellarenzo, listen to him, but I try to keep them at like a 1.5 average daily gain, somewhere in there, just so they're continuing to meet their growth expectations. But I don't want to make replacement heifers fat. So it's going to be one of those things where we might pull out any supplement while they're on summer annuals if they're starting to get a little big there. But if we've weaned them at 550, 600 pounds, summer annuals for sure. And then I'd like to bump them with this little supplement for the first 60 days.
Sure. Yeah, I still like the idea of that summer annual there. I think I like your number that we're probably grazing that 30 days earlier if we plant into a clean area versus you're planting over sod. And then we can come around that and plant our summer annuals on top of that area that's clean. And that comes to the next question here. When are we going to plant those summer annuals there?
Oh, planting summer annuals. I put some in Alabama. Right. I think it was April 13th. Saturday, April 13th. I planted some in Alabama and got a good 2-inch rain on them right after planting. They're coming up well. So I'm probably mid-April. We got to get past that. Any potential frost. I look at soil temperatures. I want to make sure I'm at 55 degrees or higher. And then I'm gonna go. I want to start going because I know May is a drier month for us. April, we still got good moisture. So I went in April this year, but I'm good from like April 15th to maybe June 1st. June 15th probably be like one of the last days I plant summer annuals. And the reason for that is probably because what you said earlier is I want to be able to plant winter annuals as early as possible in the fall. The later I plant these summer annuals, potentially they're going to grow a little bit longer in the fall if I start planting in June rather than in April. And then that way, whenever we get to September 15th to October 15th, I can start going into that prepared seed bed where we don't have that competition from a sod base. And I can start planting winter annuals and be able to graze December 1 on winter annuals if we start getting them in their late September time frame.
Nice. Dubeux, what's your planting date for summer annuals, even though I don't think summer annuals have a big fit in your cow-calf system here?
Right, and Marcelo, that can vary a little bit. I agree with Chris on as get rid of the frost. That so after May, after April 15 is typically when we're typically avoiding that problem. But it really depends on the system. Sometimes you have folks planting corn, and then they don't have anything to do after the corn, and there could potentially be a place to put some short, season of millet or sun hemp, behind corn. We've done that in situ for a few years, and it worked well. So it depends on the system. If you're just a stocker system, there's no integration with other cropping system. So yes, go ahead and plant it, by April 15, so that we can, get the most out of that and get earlier into the cool season planting. But if you're planting behind another crop, so it could potentially adjust your system.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of playing with those planting dates also, because then we can really move that production curve back and forth. And as Chris, you mentioned that you really want to get those cool season annuals as early as possible. September is a little too early for Florida. Normally we're talking about mid-October, if irrigated, normally November for most cases. But if I can have a piece of land in my property that I can plant an early, in another piece of land I can plant a late summer annual, then I'm grazing those summer annuals until November. And then I have the limpa grass, and then I have the cool season annuals. So I think my split, if I was to choose, I would probably do 60% in a good perennial sod. And I would add, in my system, I would add Bermuda grass, because I think we can really add some gain grazing Bermuda grass. 20% of my area with limper grass, 20% of my area with the prepared for those summer and winter annuals, where we're going to play with those planting dates and try to accommodate. So basically here, what we're doing is adding diversity to the system. Without diversity, we cannot accomplish that 365 days grazing. We really need to add diversity, and then make sure that we can manage those forages in a way that they're complementing each other, and we're moving those animals from one crop. I'm not talking about paddock. I'm talking about crop from one crop into the next throughout the year, and matching those requirements.
Yeah. One thing just to add, Marcelo, is that, whenever you're going in April 15th, you're not planting into annual ryegrass. So whenever I go in that early April 15th date, I prefer going into following cereal rye and oats. I'm not trying to take out winter annuals in order to plant summer annuals. I want to graze winter annuals as long as they are, they're a vegetative state, they're putting on. If they can continue to perform, I don't want to take them out. I'll keep grazing them. But as soon as they're not performing anymore, that's kind of when I am looking for. I'm looking to go into a different annual at that time. So not really competing with annual ryegrass in that springtime period. Let that play out, and then go into summer annuals once they've played out in late May.
So with probably a July planting date, whenever we start having more certain rains in the summer.
Yeah, June. Yeah, June.
June. That's right. June.
Yeah, but you said something that kind of makes me think is there's a potential for a late summer annual mix or a late summer annual planting that you can graze into that October early November time period. That potentially you take the sorghums out and you don't have the risk of prussic acid. That's something that a lot of those wheat farmers out in Oklahoma and Texas have started doing to procure stocker cattle earlier. They plant this late summer annual mix so they have fall grazing. They can precondition their cattle in the fall out there on the summer annual, still have something to graze, and then they go in and start their wheat grazing. So, it's adaptation to these plants and kind of what your system is.
Yeah, well, one thing that I would like to go back, what Chris said, I think is really important. He said that he always wanted cool season forage on his farm. And he's right, because you can put 2 pounds per day. And if you compare, if like 0.7 pounds per day that you get on Bahia grass, so for every month of your stocker on cool season forage equals roughly to 3 months of graze on Bahia grass. So in 1 month, you're doing 3. So that's really, it makes a difference. And again, we are blessed to have a region where we can grow forage year round. And again, if you just play with the different species and management option that you have, it's clear that we can do the year-round grazing here.
Hey, Chris, about the late summer annuals, have you tried any mixture with like Sudan grass or sorghum with oat, rye, and ryegrass?
I have not combined the warm season and the cool seasons together. I know that they're doing it out there in Kansas and Nebraska, where they're planting some oats in triticale at the same time that they plant the sorghums. But I haven't done any of that in the Southeast. I haven't felt that. I feel like I have just 2 different growing seasons, 2 different systems. I did put some brassicas in with a late summer annual planting one time. It was just too hot for them, even in Alabama.
Maybe that's an idea for our black oat, because the target of black oat is we could plant in September to have grazing in mid-October, early November. Maybe that's a breeding target also.
Yeah, actually, we have some black oat breeding lines that we are testing, and probably in future years we can be releasing them.
Nice. Good. Appreciate the participation of all on this, putting together a grazing system, forage grazing system for northern Florida, southern Alabama, Georgia. I think we can do a pretty good job here grazing 360.
Yeah. Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you, Chris. Kleber.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Thank you for joining us on this Cow Talks podcast. We hope you have enjoyed this conversation.
If you have any questions, ideas, follow-ups, or comments, please reach out to us through our email, forages@ifas.ufl.edu. That is forages@ifas.ufl.edu. Or find us on our social media, uf.forages on Instagram, UF Forage Team on Facebook, or UF IFAS Forages on YouTube.